Hey. Hey.
Hey, Shane, you're kind of blurry. I think it's all the light coming in that window. I don't know if that helped, but maybe it did.
Did it help?
I don't know. But maybe. That's better. There you go, wipe it off.
Wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. Do we know if Tom's on yet?
I don't see Tom.
Okay.
Still in the other meeting he's in, but he knows about this.
Yeah, he's supposed to come in and cover GitLab at some point. So whenever he pops in, we'll do that. But right now, let's give everybody a few minutes to get signed in.
He's coming. Here he is, everybody. Tom!
You're such a get. Oh,
That's a get.
get?
I thought you said get.
I did, because I was.
I did. I did.
Sorry, I did too much of my Scottish accent this morning. And now it's a little bit stuck. Hi, everybody. How we doing?
Good, how are you?
Leave all your meetings with Scottish accent.
So far, so good. I actually want to get like an accent trainer.
Like an actor.
And yeah, so that I can learn the really subtle nuances of different accents. Because I love doing accents.
Oh, it's fun. It's funny too.
Hey,
Why is it funny? It's because you're racist. That's why it's funny. No way.
I was gonna say xenophobic.
Oh.
Is the term for that. Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole. How you doing, Cassandra?
I am doing well.
You ready for another one of these?
I am ready. I have been chit-chatting in the dev channel and the community Slack about some of what we're going to talk about today. So going to lead a conversation about some requests I've had from the community lately. And then do that. We're going to have a conversation about Stalebot again. I think the issue right now is about the timeline that things should be staled. Have you cover the move to GitLab, and then time permitting, maybe something about formulas or community feedback. And as always, want to start with some kind of housekeeping, news and updates, because it seems like we have new things happening here every week, which is exciting. So I want to make sure people know what's out there and available. So we ready to get started? Okay, I'm going to take it as a yes. First of all, I want to let you all know, this has been shared on Twitter and some other places, but we do have a podcast launched now called The Hacks. It features Tom and Jimmy Chunga. And the topics are spanning across a number of different things. I've listened to 1.5 of them so far, but talking about the history of open source, what makes open source communities special, kind of the challenges, talk about cybersecurity trends, what is SecOps, so a number of different topics relevant to our group that are some SALT specific as well as just kind of interesting to the general tech industry. We have that podcast available on Spotify and on Apple, and then we had a request to get it put up on Google Music, and it's available on Google as well. So, and there's an RSS feed. So I believe between all of those things, everybody should have access to the podcast, but if not, let me know. We'll see if we can get it to you. But go ahead, subscribe, download, like. I feel like a commercial now. So do you have anything you want to add about the podcast, Tom?
No, I mean, it's been fun to make it so far. And yeah, hopefully people find it enjoyable. If you don't find it enjoyable, please keep it to yourself.
Yeah, don't listen. Yeah. I do like it. It's a free-flowing conversation podcast, which is good. I like those, where as opposed to ones that can get a little bit dry. This one's got, it's good conversation going. Upcoming events, we are still revamping meetups. Like I've said, we have a meetup coming up in March in Denver. I am working with one of our internal people and then somebody out at Microsoft to have a meetup in April, possibly hosted at the Microsoft office. And going to try to work to get meetups in several locations, once a quarter or so. So working on those. And then SaltCon VU is coming up in June. Tickets are going on sale soon, and CFP for that is still open. I believe we're taking talk suggestions. Semi-meetup related, and this is just kind of a beginning, hey, heads up, but we are in the early planning stages of doing something called SecOps Days. SecOps Days is initially going to run kind of as an unconference or a meetup format. Fairly informal. It'll run alongside existing events. So for instance, say we go to B-Sides, we would try to do a SecOps Day at B-Sides or try to do a SecOps Days before or after a meetup. They're just going to be a way to have a guided conversation, a talk about topics that are interesting, and give people a way to get together kind of after work hours to talk about different topics. The target audience for that is going to be our hands-on technologists, and I'm certainly open to locations. If anybody would like a SecOps Days in your town or topics that you'd like to hear, let me know. Initially, we're talking 20 to 40 people, maybe an evening or a half day sort of thing. And then over time, who knows, maybe it grows into a full conference. But Mo and I are heading that up, and we're in early planning stages right now, just deciding locations. So more on that. And then next week, the open hour will be abbreviated because the core team will be on site in Salt Lake City for release planning. I will be off speaking at a conference, an OWASP conference in Denver. Gareth is going to be speaking at a conference somewhere else as well, so we won't even be on the call, but so that'll be abbreviated. And then one last thing that I wanted to cover, kind of segue. I know that we have a lot of people who use Slack, but I know that we have people who use IRC, Google Groups, and other communication tools. And one of my goals is to make sure that everybody, regardless of their preferred communication tool, is getting the information about announcements, news releases, events that they need. And so I think the first step is just to figure out where everybody is and make sure I'm not missing anything. So I'm going to be sending out a quick little, it'll be like a 2 to 3 sentence survey, just take a couple minutes, but I want to know basically what is your preferred method of getting information. And the more people that respond to that, the better able we are to decide which outlets to prioritize, which outlets to use when sharing information. It's kind of helping create a toolkit to use as our community grows and ensure that everybody's getting the information that they need. So I know, like I said, I know that IRC is one area that people are using that we aren't, not everything is getting shared over there, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything else. So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey. Once it comes out, I'll just be sharing it on all of the channels. And then related to that, well, does anybody have questions about communication or preferred topics of discussion or preferred communication channels? No? Okay. There's been a Slack conversation going on about this too. And I have been, for some of our people who are in Slack and in other time zones and can't make this meeting, I've been taking their feedback into consideration as well. So that brings us to talking about these open hours. So the open hours are obviously new. They are something that we had that monthly office hour concept, and Mo and I talked, and I thought that we should have a more frequent touch base than just once a month. And so it evolved into this open hour concept. where we meet once a week and talk about what's on the community's mind. And so this is maybe 2 months into this experiment, and we're starting to figure out where it is that we can improve and how we can make this more beneficial to people. So I know that one thing right now is people would like access to the agenda and have a way to update and change and add agenda items to these open hours. And then afterwards, somebody had made the request that videos are great that we post on YouTube, and we do post all of these videos on YouTube, but people don't always have the time to sit and watch an hour-long video. So could we create summaries that we can publish as well? And so we will be starting today, Sage is going to be taking notes during these meetings, and she and I will work together to create summaries of what we talk about during the open hours that we can share out. The question is what tool to use to share both agendas and the summaries. And the criteria for the two things are kind of different. So for the agendas, we want something that people can add their preferred topics to. And right now we're using a Slack thread for that, but that doesn't solve the problem of people not on Slack. So it doesn't give everybody access to it. And Slack isn't really a great tool for keeping track of stuff like that. So we need something that people can contribute to, suggest their ideas, and see. And we also need something that people can just go and read the summaries after the event. So one document will be kind of flexible, and one document will be kind of a final document. And right now, options we're throwing around are GitHub, Google Groups, or Google Docs, and I think there was a third one that somebody suggested. But if we were to create kind of a shared repository or a shared place to find information about open hours and find summaries and agendas, what would everybody's preferences be?
I think the other suggestion was if we don't have a website, that we could use the GitHub wiki, which is a little more friendly to update and see and find. It's not a perfect place, but it might do for now until we have something that's more like one source of truth. We've talked about having sort of like that, I think it's the community SaltStack.com or SaltStackCommunity.com as some sort of landing page, and then linking to some more, landing pages within that. And so that was one suggestion. I don't know if other people have other suggestions, but that one I know came up early on, and I thought that was fair. That was a fair way to go.
The wiki?
Mm-hmm. But I'd love to hear more if other people have stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I told the people on Slack that I would bring in the feedback, so I brought in a lot of that feedback, but.
Cool.
Maybe we use the Salt event bus to put things on the agenda.
Well, we'll, as we've said in the past, eat our own dog food and salt it. I like it.
My inclination in these is always to go with the tool everybody is using, and I don't know that everybody has a GitHub account, but I would think most people do, whereas not everybody has Google or something else.
Yeah, I think that that's where a lot of people are, since that's where the source code is. So that's my inclination as well, but I'd love to hear more if other people have other ideas.
With Google Docs, you can do a shared link that anybody with that link can edit. So
Yep.
You don't have to necessarily have a Google account.
Yeah, I think it's still about getting that link to people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And having that in an available place, but not a terrible idea. All will have ups and downs. So weighing those is, I think, where we are. Yeah, anybody else?
This is something that I don't want to sit and talk about weeks and weeks. Basically, have encourage this conversation today, tomorrow, and develop and the develop Slack channel is where this is happening right now, and then decide on something and start implementing that for the March 12th, is it? For the second one of these in March. So people know what to expect. Yeah. So I don't think, I mean, if whatever we use, that's the other thing about these open hours in general, if something's not working, we can iterate on it. We can reflect, figure out what's going wrong and change it. So we can just pick a tool, and if we find out it's not working, see what other tools might be available to us. So definitely want to hear any other input.
I think the wiki's fine. Let's go with the wiki.
GitHub Wiki.
If we don't like it, we can change it later.
That's what I'm saying. None of this is, you know, sacred text. It's a way for us to all communicate and make the information accessible to the most people. So
Do the wiki and then put it up on the community page.
yes.
And
Yeah, the community page will be getting, in coming weeks and months, it'll start getting updated as well and be kind of a landing page for everything. So open hours, work groups, all those things. That's just a matter of, initially it was a matter of like getting administrative permissions and stuff, but that page will start getting updated more and be your jumping off point for the community. So.
Yeah, if nobody has anything else on this call, we'll just take what we've got.
Yeah, and then, I mean, feel free to weigh in on that conversation on the develop channel and SaltStack Community Slack, or DM me directly, and we can continue the conversation. And it'll probably just be what I think, what most people are using, and it's looking like something GitHub related, whether it's a repository or the wiki. I don't know, but I like the idea of GitHub too, because like I said, everybody, almost everybody at least, is using it, so we're already there. Okay, and I think that was all I had. I mean, all these conversations, all the stuff about the open hours, I appreciate everybody's input. I appreciate everybody being very respectful and explaining whys and stuff. It's even things like somebody had requested that we publish a summary of the open hours, and that's something that I hadn't thought about doing, but it's a great suggestion for people who can't be at these meetings. And so I really appreciate that everybody's starting to open up and make suggestions, make input, and suggest solutions in a respectful way. I think that that's going to help this community as a whole go far and collaborate more successfully in the future. So encouraged to see that, and encouraged by everybody's patience as I work out figuring out what the right toolkit and the right set of processes and structure is for organizing all of these things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Cassandra and I kind of came in after things had just gotten started with many of these meetings. And so we feel like we're coming in the middle, and yet we came in the middle of the beginning. And so some of it is that we're just not sure what was set up with Kavya and community members, and tried to just keep the ball rolling. And so we love that people are suggesting things, because we simply didn't realize what hadn't been suggested or thought through or planned. And some of it, I know I was sort of surprised. I was like, we're not doing that? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. We should do that.
Yes. Yes. Let's see, Wayne has a comment. We can always add a bot to the Salt IRC channel. All right. And what do you mean, what would this bot do, Wayne, that you suggested in the chat?
It sounded like he might have been traveling. He might not be able to
Okay.
voice that. I think that it's something we could develop, probably simply a little bot that would go do things. An idea.
Okay. I'll just make note of that.
I think he's talking about is it like a bridge between IRC and Slack?
Well, we have that.
Yeah.
I think he's talking about a bot that would take something from that channel and add it to an agenda. Wherever that lives. Yeah.
Sorry, that's basically
no
what I
worries.
was suggesting, is that if we had a bot in IRC that would go ahead and add agenda items to somewhere in GitHub, then that would make it easy for anybody who had anything to get on the agenda, you know, all of the avenues, whether they had Slack or GitHub or IRC, whatever their preferred communication channel was, they would be able to go ahead and access the agenda.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Something we can look towards.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ideas. The only thing that I would see about a bot is it takes an extra step of commitment and effort to actually go to the GitHub page and post, hey, I want to talk about this thing. I don't know. I wonder if that would indicate maybe.
I think it's talking about wherever you are.
Oh, got it.
And then the bot would go and do that to the wherever the agenda is. And so we could talk about it. It's still an idea, but I think it's a good one. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Ideas are good. All right. So that's all I had about the open hour agendas. I'm still, smoothing out that process, but we will have something figured out, and starting March 12th, we will have an agenda that everybody can access and a place to find those summaries. And then Sage and I are working on making sure things get uploaded in a timely manner on YouTube. She's going to be taking uploads of the weekly hours. I'm going to be taking uploads of the work groups, I think is what we decided on. That will happen as well. All right. Do we want to discuss GitLab or Stalebot next?
Let's go with GitLab.
Okay. Tom, I know there's been a lot of questions about why we moved to GitLab, what's going on, kind of some of the things behind it. So do you want to?
Yeah. I have to admit that more people seem to notice than I thought would. I came back and so we've got quite a few projects that use POP that are emerging as we continue to kind of build out this overall ecosystem. And one of the challenges that I was running into is that POP itself is still a little fluid. I mean, it's far more concrete now than it has been in the past, but I am occasionally making a change that in POP that I need to then change all the other POP projects. The other thing is that internally inside of SaltStack, we've been moving towards GitLab. We've been moving towards GitLab for our internal projects for quite some time now. We've made this shift because a number of GitLab's workflows work very nicely into how we'd like to do CI/CD pipelines and a lot of our development and engineering management. And as we move forward internally at SaltStack, we're again moving more and more towards GitLab. GitLab also makes it, frankly, a lot easier to manage groups of projects without always having to go and make organizations. And so with these moves that have been happening internally at SaltStack, it felt very natural to move the POP projects to GitLab before they got more adoption and more tracking, because there are a number of projects and repos we've got, in particular Salt and the repos around Salt, that will never be moved from GitHub because we just can't reasonably do this. There's too much tracking. There's too much reliance on GitHub's workflows and for the community around it. But again, I felt like being able to track and manage groups of projects has been significantly easier in GitLab. So I moved POP and the POP projects, which existed at the time, and now they've almost doubled in the last 2 or 3 weeks, over to GitLab. So that includes POP, Item, Heist, Umbra, as well as a rewrite of Grains, and pluggable interfaces for Grains have been moved, are over there now. Quite a few projects. Let's see, POP Build, POP Release. POP Build is the underlying system that we're using to make single binaries of Salt. Just to cycle that together. But again, we're not moving the Salt repo. Now, many people have asked, do I need to get a GitLab account now if I want to contribute to these? So you can log into GitLab using your GitHub credentials. So you don't need to get a GitLab account. All you've got to do is hit the login button and click GitHub, and you'll log into GitLab with your same credentials that you have on GitHub. The workflows are extremely similar on GitHub for contributions. It's been a lot easier for us to spin up, again, CI/CD tooling around the projects that we have in GitLab. And that's been a huge benefit to really speeding some of these things up. So yeah, all you've got to do is log into GitLab with your GitHub credentials. That's totally fine. You can log into GitLab with a number of different credentials. I think they also support Google and a few others. So really, we don't see this as something that should be a burden to people. The other argument that I've received is people saying that if it's not on GitHub, it's not open source. The Linux kernel is not developed on GitHub. I will not accept that as a reasonable excuse for forcing someone to use GitHub when I think that we feel very strongly that there are better tools for the circumstances that we have that can be found in GitLab. So yeah, GitLab has grown significantly over the last few years in particular. And their feature sets are very robust, and it's not painful to use anymore like it was 5 or 6 years ago. It's absolutely a joy to use. It also makes collecting, I can't emphasize this enough. I just love the fact that I can have a folder with projects in it. And organizing large numbers of projects is going to become increasingly important as we move into compartmentalizing aspects of our code bases, including Salt. And so it's so much easier to go to a folder and say, show me all the merge requests for this folder. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything I've missed here. Cassandra, were there any other concerns or questions around GitLab that I didn't cover in my my little spiel there, in my monologue?
I don't think so. I think there was just people wanted to know why we had moved to GitLab, and I think there was concern that everything would move to GitLab. And it sounds like you've clarified that everything is not going to be moving to GitLab.
Yeah, we are going to move a lot into GitLab. Like, don't take me, you know. But those projects that are very core around Salt are going to stay in GitHub. I guess one of the things is we are looking at compartmentalizing components of Salt, right? And we've talked about this before, and that's a lot of the motivation around POP, is that we can make large components of Salt more pluggable, more standalone, and start to push them in their own right. Those projects are going to be on GitLab. And there are certain aspects of code inside of Salt that we would really like to deprecate long-term as far as being maintained in Salt so that it's easier to maintain, and more fluid to maintain. And those projects are going to be on GitLab. But the main Salt project is not going to leave. Now, I guess there is one other thing that I did want to mention, is that if somebody wants to extend the POP projects, they don't have to use GitLab. They don't have to use GitHub. They can use tarballs if they want. The only thing that we say that if you're extending POP projects, then those extensions should be published to PyPy. So yeah, we don't care where people develop extensions or usage of POP code. I think that'd be silly. If somebody wants to use Mercurial, go nuts. I love Mercurial.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Tom. And let's talk about Stalebot. I believe Sage and Wayne were going to cover this, but what was the main question, I think, was, or one of the concerns is that 30 days is not long enough for us to give ourselves before things go stale. And so I think I want to just open a conversation, get people's thoughts on that, and figure out how to resolve.
On the main ticket, I had suggested as I went through and started looking at some things, and that we just haven't gotten quite there yet to 30 days for the core team to actually follow up. Some people are, some people aren't. I think that's our goal. And so I had suggested just moving it out 15 days to a 45-day trigger, and maybe perhaps a 60. Then someone else had suggested, I don't remember exactly who, I don't have it in front of me, to move it to 90 days. They thought that was better. I proposed that because what I was hearing was this just isn't long enough, but I didn't have a number around it. And so I wanted to open that discussion up to say, well, what timestamp is likely, or do people expect? Because I think we had a year or a year and a half before. And so we've gone from, a really large number to a really small number, and maybe we need to rein that in until we can get to 30 days. But I didn't have any numbers to go with. So I was interested to hear from the community if 90 days is what people expect or want, or is it 60 or 45, or what are people thinking, and kind of have a conversation around that. I do think that the core team wants to get to 30 days, and that is a goal. I'm not sure that we're there yet, because I am spending quite a bit of time unstaling some things that we haven't followed up on yet, things that still need to be triaged or have pending discussions. Or someone has gotten back with us and we were waiting for information and we just haven't had time to get back to that. So we're just not quite there yet. And I understand that. And that's why I think that it needs an iteration, but I didn't have a number to go on.
I'm good with 90.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still
if you're just doing manual work, then what's the point of 30 days? That still, that's, not purposeful.
Yeah. And I think some of it too is that the team has grown. And so there's still heavy things happening for people that have been on the team, and probably not full training for those who are newer to know how to, what our process is. And so we're going to do some retraining, like on the triage process, and then how we're going to do follow-up and how we're going to communicate some of those sort of soft things that I think we might be missing that are showing up as gaps and are visible. And so we want to address those. I think 90 days could be reasonable. I worry that it might be a little too much, but I thought 60 actually sounded okay. But we do need to give it some time. I think we've given 30 days some time, and now I'm doing quite a bit of manual work on the opposite end of it. So I do think that we need to increase it, but I'm not sure how much. Maybe we do it incrementally and wait. I don't know. Yeah, Wayne.
On if we change 60 or 90 days, that
You're
we won't just end out doing, am I breaking up?
You're breaking up. I don't know that we can hear you. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll reiterate. I think that whatever we change it to, we also need to give it some time to see if that is beneficial or not. And I don't know what that time frame is, because it may depend on how long it's being triggered. So I'm not sure what that algorithm is. Let's see. Wayne says, the thing I'm not sure about, if we change to 60 or 90 days, we won't just be doing the same thing, but in 60 or 90 days, like as we were doing for a year and a half, or that we're just doing it, that we're still doing manual work. And I think that's where you're going with it, that we're still doing manual work, but we just have spread it out over longer. Part of the reason is that I think that we need to also address some things that are not specific to StaleBot, such as retraining on triage process, and then maybe even defining more that triage process so that we're not running into some of this issue that comes back to StaleBot. So those things don't seem connected, and yet they are. It's a little odd. And if we have a little bit of time to do that, then I think we may even come up with some more automation that doesn't have anything to do with StaleBot that then we could come back down. But we'll still need to give it some time to kind of see. So that's where I'm hoping that we can get to. And I think that people were also afraid to give a number. So I wanted to open that up to say, well, let's start talking about a number, because I don't want people to be afraid to say something. So that's kind of where I was going with that number, because I do think the goal is still to get to 30 days. I just don't know that we're there yet. Do we know what our triage lead time is? It depends on who's doing triage. Depends, right, and it depends on the week. It depends on if there was a holiday. It depends on if we had something else. It's, you know, are we releasing? There's a lot of things there. So I don't think that it's a standard lead time.
Do we have at least like an average, or even, I mean, do you have any
I haven't taken one.
visibility
I
into
should.
those numbers?
You know, I would be interested to take some of those numbers, but I've actually been spending a lot of time doing some manual work on StailBot, so I haven't done that.
Because that seems like it would be worthwhile to know, like, do we have a bottleneck in our pipeline? Are we backing up, or are we draining it? And I guess that's the big
I think that's a good question. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. I'll look at that. And of course, I'm interested to hear from other people if they feel like 30 days and it's the same issues over and over again that are getting staled, then we probably need to look at that. Or if it's other issues and it's a larger set, but I think some numbers would help us for sure.
Well, I think part of the issue is that once it's triage, you know, we only do triage for a week increments.
Mm-hmm.
You triage though, you're the ones you got in your week, and then it's like you're done, and nobody really takes ownership of an issue or tracking issues. You know what I mean? And they just kind of sit there, and then they go stale, and then you get yelled at.
Yeah, I think we need to look at some follow-up, and we could even put a bot around that. And I think we also need to look at some definitions. So next week, when we're doing some planning and a bunch of us are in headquarters, I want to have some conversations, just us, but still include everybody that's remote, because we still have a significant amount of people that are going to be remote. But I'm hoping that we'll have this conversation and we'll kind of hammer some things out and also say, this is what we're going to tackle and this is what we're going to try during this time frame.
I mean, it could almost be a full-time job to just sit there and manage all the issues, you know?
Yes, I have been spending a lot of my time doing that.
We kind of do that in support, right? We got 2 or 3 guys that manage all the support tickets. And so, I don't really see an issue or a difference between our open issues and our support issues.
Right.
Yet we don't have anybody on open that sits and manages open issues.
Nope. No, we share it across the team, and I think that's right. And but I think we still need to get into some of these use cases that we've even talked about amongst ourselves, where I'm like, so what happens next after that? This goes into this status, but then what happens? And everybody's like, well, it kind of depends. And I'm like, well, we should probably write that down and then kind of go through some of these use cases so everybody has an idea of what's going to happen next. And that's what I plan to do next week. And then that's where some of the stuff that Megan's been working on with labels and the triage process, we'll update those once we know, once we've made some decisions and said, oh, well, this is how that should go, you know. And I think that'll be clear to the community as well as to us. Right now, we can dive into the weeds, and I don't think that's particularly useful at this time, but next week we will have some dedicated time to do that and kind of hammer it out and then make some decisions and say, this is where we're going. I hope that sounds good to people. I wondered why I was getting more development time. Because I was doing more manual stuff and I was doing more tickets, maybe. I was trying to like update the StailBot configuration, not because it's me or that I have some sort of ownership over it, but I can update a file. I mean, I know how to do that. And then it leaves you guys that are doing development and harder things that I don't know how to do those and to work harder on that. My whole role is to support you guys, so I hope that you have seen that you've gotten some more development time. Well, that's all I've got. If other people have stuff about StailBot, I hope they'll DM me or Cassandra. Let us know. Shane, were you going to say something?
Well, I was saying you can either bump it to 90 and then work forward, or you could start bumping it back, start 45, see if that makes any difference. You can go to 60.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that Wayne's right. I'm going to pull some numbers and then we'll look at it. Okay, cool. What's next?
What's next? What does the community have to bring in? Does anybody have anything that is on their minds?
Yeah, are we open to open questions and comments?
Yeah. That's where we are. Community feedback, follow-ups, questions, comments, victories. I know that we want to, like I said, want to have a discussion about formulas. We're waiting for somebody to give me his availability to be part of an open hour and kind of help co-lead that discussion. Mai Fai, I believe is how you say his name. But he has questions. He's curious to know more about what purpose do the formulas serve? Are they an academic exercise or something more? And what is their future? But we're putting that on hold until he can be part of that conversation, and he wants to talk to the formulas group on Google before he decides when to join the group. So that's coming. That's coming up in a coming week. I will let you know once we get it on the agenda. Okay. Silence.
We're good at being quiet.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about? Where to keep agendas, StailBot. StailBot's been talked about and talked about.
I know that we had talked about dedicating a whole hour on a weekly, on the open hour weekly meeting to doing a test clinic and how to write tests going forward. And I think we still have that on our docket. I don't think we have it planned just yet.
Yes.
There's just a lot of moving pieces, but we do want to do that. And we have spent, I know each one of the developers on this team have spent individual time with community members and partners and lots of people, even internal people on how we're going forward to writing tests. And we'll continue to do that and then hope to have a clinic.
Yes, and that is something that we'll be working on. We just need to find the time again.
Yeah.
I know we talked about doing one on triage as well. I think we wanted to make that a topic of conversation. So
we probably will as we go forward and make changes. So yeah, it'll probably come up again.
Okay. Well, if nobody has anything else, we all get back about 15 minutes of our day. Takeaways, the big takeaway that I have is just that I will get a better structure around what the agenda looks like. We'll get a typed up summary of what we talked about today, get that published, we'll get the video uploaded, and then we will see you all next week. Like I said, it'll be an abbreviated meeting, and then the following week, hopefully we'll be talking about formulas a little bit more in depth. So it would be great if Tom could join us for that one as well. But I'll let you know once we get a date figured out with Mai Fai, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and I will talk to you all later.
Bye.
Bye.